Who's had a good week, Dominic?
I'm giving good week to same-sex couples in the European Union after the EU's top court ruled that all EU countries have to recognise same-sex marriages that have taken place in other EU countries, even if same-sex marriage is still illegal in the country.
Amazing news. Okay, so it's about same-sex marriages being recognised across EU borders. Presumably, this has happened because somebody brought it to court, right? Like, who was that person?
Yes, this case was brought to the European Union's Court of Justice by a gay Polish couple who had been living in Germany and got married in Berlin in 2018. Things started to get difficult for them when they moved back to their home country a few years later. When they arrived in Poland, they went to Warsaw's civil registry office to register their marital status, but that registration was declined because in Poland, a marriage is only between a man and a woman. There's actually not even any civil partnership law for same-sex couples in Poland yet. The couple, these two guys, Jakub and Mateusz, bravely decided to go down the years-long process of appealing that decision. First, taking their case to a Polish regional court in 2020. They claimed that by not recognizing their marital status, the authorities were restricting their freedom of movement, one of the key principles of the European Union. That case was rejected, so they thought, okay, we're going to go the next step and appealed to Poland's Supreme Administrative Court, who then referred it to the top court of the European Union, the Court of Justice in Luxembourg in 2023. And finally, after all those years have passed, the Court of Justice of the EU made its ruling last week and said that Poland's refusal to register the same-sex marriage was a failure under EU law to respect their private and family life.
This feels really huge. I remember when this news first broke last week, there were people very excitedly tweeting, this effectively means that same-sex marriage is legal across the EU. From the little that I've read about this since then, am I correct in thinking that isn't the case? This ruling doesn't force a country like Poland to make same-sex legal, does it?
Yeah, it doesn't mean that. EU member states still have the freedom to legislate however they'd like to around who can get married and who can't. Poland actually has something in its constitution saying that marriage is only between a man and a woman. So actual gay marriage legislation in Poland is very likely quite a long way off.
But for the couple that brought the case, what does it mean for them? Like, do they get to be treated like any married couple in Poland? Like, have they managed to find a loophole to gaining better rights in a country that is still like really very un-gay friendly?
Yeah, that's the big question, and it's not been answered fully yet. It really depends on how the Polish authorities decide to implement this ruling. The EU court says that the Polish authorities have to recognize their marriage, but the next step requires politicians to get involved. So it's possible that the couple might have to continue fighting in order to get the same rights as a heterosexual married couple. And those rights shouldn't be downplayed. Marriage is not just this symbolic thing. It also gives you specific rights as a couple around taxation, inheritance, property, or even around your pension. Hospital visitation rights can also be a problem for same-sex couples in countries where there is no civil partnership or marriage rights for us queers. But yet, we don't quite know how it's going to play out in Poland yet.
And what have the Polish government said? Like, you would think, or you would hope, like Prime Minister Donald Tusk and his government, they came into power promising that they were going to improve rights for LGBTQ plus people. You would hope they would be fairly sympathetic to this ruling. No?
Yeah, he did come into power promising that life would get better for LGBTQ plus people, but not much has actually happened on that front since he came into power. One thing did improve, those controversial LGBT free zones that were established by local authorities during the time of the previous government have now all gone. But actually that happened in the courts, not because of legislation from Tusk's government. The government has tried to expand hate speech laws to include sexual orientation as a protected category, But that one got caught up in the Constitutional Court, which ruled that the changes were unconstitutional. There also hasn't yet been the promised movement on civil partnerships, although there is a bill in the works at the moment, a bill that has been watered down, partly because of two small conservative parties in Tusk's coalition. If that were to pass, it could very well be vetoed by the conservative president anyway. So things have not been looking very rosy for the Polish LGBTQ plus community, despite a somewhat gay-friendlier government being in power. And therefore, yeah, this ruling is really important. But sorry, your question was, has the Tusk government responded to the ruling? And yes, they have. But first, I'll mention what the deputy chief of the president's office said. He said that Poland will not succumb to the terror of rainbow rulings.
Charming. That bodes well.
Terrifying rainbow rulings, right? But as for Prime Minister Donald Tusk's government, they have responded more positively. The Justice Minister said that Poland will have to implement the ruling in some way. And the Secretary of State, who is responsible for LGBT rights, said this is a historic ruling that begins a completely new phase in the legal protection of same-sex couples.
Okay, that sounds promising. I mean, this is after all a government that was very big on like rule of law. We believe in the rule of law. So you would hope they will actually do what they say.
Yeah, you would hope
You'd
so.
hope.
We'll just have to wait and see how it pans out and exactly how far they go with the implementation of this ruling. Of course, if Poland weren't to abide by this ruling, the European Court of Justice can impose ongoing fines until it does implement it properly. So, yeah, this isn't just a symbolic ruling.
And does this ruling mean that loads of same-sex couples living in countries like Poland, where it's not legal, are going to start traveling abroad to get married so that they can then go home and have that marriage recognized in their home country?
Yeah, that's something I was wondering too, whether there'll suddenly be a big, huge boom in what people refer to sometimes as marriage tourism for the
Yeah.
gays. And I saw a piece of analysis in the Irish outlet RTE that suggested the ruling had been worded in a way that could rule out the possibility of that happening. That journalist said that the ruling seemed to limit the rights to same-sex couples who were actually living in another country when they got married, as opposed to just hopping across the border to take advantage of same-sex marriage rights and then coming back. I wanted to know more about how this could actually play out, so I got in touch with friend of the pod, research coordinator at Democracy Reporting International, Jakub Jarachewski, our go-to person for whenever we have a complicated legal question about Poland and the EU. And he started with saying, so, as usual with law, it's complicated and it depends.
Great summary. Why can't it just be straightforward and easy?
Oh, I know. Yeah, but thank goodness there are people like Jakub who can help us understand what's actually going on. He said the court ruled in a specific case of a couple who resided in Germany and were registered there. The court did not say anything about a different situation, for example, if non-residents would conduct a marriage abroad. So, yeah, we may have to wait until another couple who are in a different situation, maybe some people in a more marriage tourism situation, take the authorities to court again. I was speaking to producer Wojciech about this marriage tourism thing, and he said that he does know gay married couples in Poland, and they all went abroad to make it happen to places like Copenhagen and Amsterdam. He didn't know like on what scale this has been happening, but he certainly knows people who've done it. And for people like that, this ruling probably does feel like a glimmer of hope, even if it doesn't necessarily automatically apply to them. If a marriage tourism case would come to court, it's perfectly possible that in that case, the court would once again rule in favor of protecting the rights to family and the rights to freedom of movement for the same-sex couples again. And Jakub suggested to me that if that happened, he believed that the Court of Justice would probably rule in favor of the same-sex couple again.
Okay, that's good. Although, yeah, we'll have to see how things shake out. So far, you've been talking pretty exclusively about Poland, but of course, that's not the only country within the EU that doesn't recognise gay marriage. So presumably, if this is like an EU court ruling, it could have implications in other countries too, right?
Yes, you're absolutely right. Yeah, and it's worth saying that same sex marriage is pretty widespread in the west of the European Union, but in the east of the European Union, not so much. Only two European Union states on the eastern side of the bloc offer marriage for same sex couples. Do you know which two they are, Katie?
Ooh. Way to put me on the spot here. Lithuania? Is that one of them?
No.
It
Your
took me not
favorite
do this.
country?
Slovenia.
Yeah. And a very digital country.
Estonia.
Yes. Yes. Well done. You got there. There are also quite a few countries that only offer some form of civil partnership for same sex couples, but not marriage. So places
Hmm.
like Czech Republic, Hungary, Italy, Latvia. And then there are indeed countries like Poland, Romania, Slovakia, and Bulgaria that don't even offer same sex civil partnerships. So if a case were to emerge in the courts in one of those countries, they should, in theory, also respect the ruling of the European Court of Justice. This doesn't just apply to Poland. So it's quite a momentous ruling, even if there is a lot of uncertainty around it. And I really wanted to know how this ruling was landing with the LGBTQ plus community in Poland. So producer Wojciech Oleksiak put me in touch with someone called Agata, a 24-year-old who lives in Poland and is one of the many young LGBTQ plus people in Poland who entered adult life with so much uncertainty around the legal status of their relationships. Agata left us a voice memo and said, "Overall, I'm glad that such decisions are being made at a higher level. Although I don't have high hopes attached to this decision, because many times it's turned out that the authorities in Poland are Eurosceptic. And their reaction to EU decisions is usually to try and find a way to bypass them or implement them as late as possible. So this Euroscepticism discourages me, and that applies to many issues. As for this particular ruling, I'm glad there is at least the necessary minimum. I see it as a kind of opening, but I would like more. I'm glad that at least the EU, if not Poland, provides such things. Although I don't have high hopes for compliance or any real local change because of it."
Hmm.
So, yeah, I think that sums it up well. It's a good week for same sex couples in the EU, even if it is only really a small step towards progress.
Hmm.